Hello, everybody, and welcome to another scintillating episode of the Chocolate Bros podcast. Coming in hot. How you doing, Brian?
I'm just coming in sizzling hot. I'm having coffee this morning. I don't normally have coffee. I had some coffee. I'm on fire over here. I got to say it. Hey, everybody. We are the Chocolate Bros. That's Adam, and I'm Brian. What's going on, Adam?
Yeah, we're bros. Check us out at www.fortunatochocolate.com. And if you're in the Seattle area, why not come by our new retail store over in Issaquah? That's 1445 Northwest Mall Street, Suite E3, Issaquah, Washington.
Is that address of the retail store and the information about it up on the website?
It is, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, you want to know something pretty awesome? We've talked about this before. By the way, let me say this. The reason we haven't done a podcast in a while is because Brian has been in Peru, but now that he's back, we're going to hopefully get back on our 2 shows per week routine.
Absolutely.
That's realistic. We could do
that. That is realistic. That is realistic and pragmatic.
Very good.
Yes.
So we've talked before about how surreal it is when people leave. It's still surreal to this day when people leave a review on the website saying how much they love the chocolate. We're so appreciative. We got our first 5-star review on the store up on Google as well.
Did we really? That's fantastic.
Love it, bro.
That's great stuff. And I just got to say, you mentioned, hey, if you're in the area, absolutely, come on by. We would love to see you. Do the right thing. Come on by the store. Do the right thing for yourself. Do the right thing for yourself and for your taste buds, because you're going to get some free hot chocolate. And I got to tell you, I had a cup of the hot chocolate yesterday, Adam. It's delicious. I'm saying this to Adam for people that are out there that don't know. The retail store is a little bit more Adam's project than mine. I handle things in Peru. I handle the fulfillment of the orders that we get on the website. Adam has really taken charge opening this retail store. The place looks great. It feels great. The hot chocolate is scrumptious. That thing is going off, Adam. Well done.
Well, anything that has to do with how good things taste is really I'm throwing it back on you, because the quality of our chocolate really, and we're going to get into how chocolate is made in this show, but whatever good flavor our chocolate has, I think it mostly goes to you. But I am somebody who can get people to come into a store. So I'll take credit.
We had lunch yesterday, and I saw you giving out free hot chocolate cards to, I don't know, everybody that wasn't a part of our lunch group.
Did that make you squeamish? Every
other person. No, I would say I had a feeling of bemused enjoyment. I could not bust in on people's conversations at the tables around us in a restaurant to let them know. The people didn't seem offended. They seemed quite pleased to be receiving those cards.
People love chocolate, dude.
Yeah.
People love chocolate. There's only one, and I was thinking a lot about this. I mean, there's only one other chocolate shop in town. And they do confections. I mean, they do bonbons. They're cool people, and in fact, they carry our product.
That's right. But let me just say this: they're not giving a darn thing away over there. They're not giving any hot chocolate. You want to get a freebie, you got to come to our spot. But you know what? Come on over, enjoy that hot chocolate. I dare you to try the hot chocolate and then not buy some chocolate to take home. It's not going to happen. It's too delicious.
And you want to know what we really have lucked out on is the gentleman who is working in our stores and who came up with our hot chocolate recipe. He is the husband, Javier Valencia. He's the husband of Rosa, who's one of the women who helps out with shipping our chocolate.
I was just over there, just said good morning to Javier and Rosa. They're over there working hard. Great folks.
And Javier has a pretty extensive culinary background, and in fact, as a sort of a side business, sold wedding cakes, and built up a pretty decent following. The demand for his wedding cakes were so strong that he decided to stop doing that, and so now he's working for us, and he's going to help us develop new products. And he came up with our hot chocolate recipe, and is just an overall great dude. So the hot chocolate is tremendous. I'm learning more about what it takes to attract people into a retail store. So we're out buying balloons. We're going to be hanging balloons from our sign to draw attention to our signs that are on the street.
Yep.
And yeah, you really got to just be out there letting people know. That's what it's all about, bro.
Yep. That's it. So, well, you're doing a good job. Keep up the great work, Adam. And anyone who's listening, who's within drive, if you're within a 2-day drive of our store, you should make the drive before it gets snowy. Get over those mountain passes before it gets snowy, folks. You don't want to wait till spring for this.
Make the trip. And I'll say one other thing, that already it's starting to develop, but I have expressed this in our emails that we send out to our customers. I think I have a much stronger inclination towards this than you do, but I really just like the feel of being a community shop where people come in and we can chat. I can get to know our neighbors. We can give them something that they're going to love. Oh, as the years go on, we can become a staple in people's lives. Already, we have mothers coming in with their children, and it's like a weekly routine. Like every single week they're coming in to see us before they go to gymnastics class or dance class or right on the way. And I'm really looking forward to developing our relationships in the community and seeing these kids grow up and having us be a part of their weekly routine. I'm stoked on that. That's something that means a lot to me.
That's great. And you're right. That is definitely more your thing. I don't relish being a good neighbor. I'm anti moms and kids. I just don't care for them at
Always
all.
have been. Always
have been. It's ironic. I'm married with 2 kids, but my feelings are mixed. I mean, I'm not really a fan. And no, I have no desire to be a productive member of the community.
I know.
I just, none of that appeals to me.
True operations guy.
True ops guy.
Yeah, just anything having to do with people is not really your thing.
Yeah, that's no. I mean, my basic take on people is meh.
Yeah. Much more interested in a process that puts out a super high quality product that's basically perfect.
I like machines and pallet jacks. I'm into I like plants. I'm into the trees. Yeah, I dig those.
I'm like, hey Brian, want to try this hot chocolate? Like, yeah, give it to me. Like as you're walking out the door. I'm busy. I have stuff to do.
I gotta go.
Yeah,
I gotta go. That's what's gonna be on my grave. He had to go.
Yeah, keep it moving. That'll be on your.
That's right. Yeah. I gotta go. I really had to go.
Here's what you put in your gravestone. Check this visit off your list.
That's right. I got one last thing on my to-do list. I'm checking it off on the last day.
No, but also you're gonna want the people who are visiting you to keep it moving.
Absolutely.
Like, check this off your list and go on to the next thing.
Yeah, be like that's gonna be my epitaph. Beat it, Junior. Beat it.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
With the 3 little dots at the end to keep it moving.
That's right. So anyhow, great stuff on the store, Adam. I'm impressed.
It's fun, dude, and
I'm impressed as always.
And here's another thing you would not do, bro, that I'm doing for at least 2 hours, pretty much every single day. I'm walking around parking lots in the rain talking to people.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't. Even if it was sunny. I would not do that.
Yeah. And again, you would think people would be put off.
Especially because you're not only a great big meathead, but you're also vaguely homeless looking. I mean, you're not wearing like professional attire when you're doing this or anything.
And so what I do is I shout from a distance, but I announce my approach.
Right.
I kind of shout when I'm 10 feet away. I go,
hey, free hot chocolate guy coming in.
No, I go, hey, we just opened up a chocolate shop. And then they go, okay.
A chocolate. They heard chocolate, and it's enough to
and it's a chocolate shop.
Disarm there. Do you then pull out a knife and rob them?
Yeah. Then I offer to help them put the groceries into their car.
Oh, it's that old scam. I got it.
Yeah, and then I run away with their groceries.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, but same thing like you said. People actually are way more willing as long as you give them, you preface your approach with something that they might like. They're way more willing to give you hearing than you would assume.
I lost my wallet and I need to get to Tacoma. Can I get some? I just need a couple bucks for gas.
Yeah. There's an ATM inside Target. If you need to get cash, we can go in there together.
Yeah. Yep. That's very popular.
Yeah. I actually once gave some money to a dude who ran that scam. Felt pretty good about myself. And then I told someone what they did. They're like, that's totally a scam.
Yeah.
And then I felt a little bit worse about myself.
I give money to people when I want to. The single mom who's outside the Trader Joe with the sign. I'm certainly no matter what drove her to be there, whether what's on the sign is real or not, she probably needs the $2 more than I do. And if it shines a little light in the world, I'm willing to shine. So I do that. But I particularly dislike the I'm out of gas and got to get to Tacoma scam. That one I don't try to support.
In this particular case, we're getting off track, but in this particular case where I gave the dude some money, it was a man, but he had a bunch of kids with him, and he did play the I need some gas. I ended up giving the dude $100 because I'm that kind of guy. I'll give someone $100.
Wow, you went big. That's amazing.
But afterwards, someone told me it was a scam, and I thought maybe it was, but there were still kids with him. So something's going on.
Chances are that money ended up being food for his kids in some way.
Yeah, and also once there was a guy and his son standing outside of a grocery store raising money for like a youth basketball trip that they were trying to take, and I gave that kid $100 too. So there you go.
And
give someone $100, bro.
That man was former power forward for the Utah Jazz, Karl Malone. He was out raising money for his kids' basketball team. So good for you for supporting that, Adam. Although Malone made millions in his career, I don't know why he couldn't have done it himself. But anyhow, good for you, bro.
The mailman.
The mailman.
I believe that guy actually drove long haul trucks.
He did actually drive long haul trucks.
Yeah, the mailman, Carl Malone.
That's right.
Never won a championship though.
No, he did not.
Yeah. All right. So tell us about
let's get to business, Adam. Enough with foolery, this tomfoolery. Come on.
So tell us about your trip to Peru, bro.
I went to Peru. It's never a good time to leave your family and go traveling, and traveling internationally in the time of COVID is fraught. But I needed to do it. All my bank cards and digital tokens and passport and tax papers and everything all are long expired.
You're a Peruvian citizen. People don't know that about you.
I'm a Peruvian citizen. I lived in Peru for 15 years. My wife is Peruvian. My kids were born in Peru. And I took Peruvian citizen. I'm a dual citizen. I didn't have to renounce American citizenship or anything. That's nothing I would ever do. But I'm a dual American Peruvian, U.S. Peruvian citizen, and that confers certain paperwork needs on it. And I had to go down and do my paperwork, and it just couldn't wait anymore. So I went down. I was supposed to go a month ago, but we got a full-on direct exposure to a COVID positive with symptoms person. And that got reported to the King County Department of Health, and they put us on, kind of like self-quarantine, and I wasn't able to travel. So I had to remove everything around. And I finally did go down on 2 Saturdays ago and got back this most recent Saturday. And, traveling, long haul travel in the time of COVID is not a fun deal. It's never fun.
It's never fun, man. But one thing I had totally forgotten about that you reminded me of is that in Peru, COVID came right on the back of an already existing major league humanitarian crisis.
So Peru, at the time that we moved to the U.S. About 3 and change years ago, was already suffering from the fallout of the Venezuelan crisis, the political, social, and economic crisis that's happening in Venezuela. Has caused millions of they think probably 7 or 8 million Venezuelans to flee their country. 25% of that country, or maybe it's not that much, but a significant percentage of that country's overall population. And approximately 2 million Venezuelan refugees are living in Peru. And that has had a drastic, Peru is a country of 35 million people. So that would be the rough equivalent of 20 million refugees showing up in the United States destitute.
And it's not like Peru's not like the United States with a pretty strong economy that could pick up some folks and get them working. I mean,
there are no resources to handle that kind of influx in Peru. So there was already an economic crisis, a labor crisis. Those Venezuelans came in and started displacing lower end, poorer Peruvian workers by being willing to work even cheaper, and harder, frankly, because they had the desperation of starving essentially. And that was causing social problems and a lot of sort of xenophobia. And then just as that, was sort of flowering, COVID came, and Peru had one of the worst COVID pandemic experiences in the world, probably the highest. They don't know for sure. They don't have a great record keeping, but probably the highest per capita COVID death rate in the entire world happened in Peru.
Well, I know from talking to Oscar, our operations manager in Peru, he said some of the little villages where we buy cacao, like little villages of 100 people, like 10 died. Like 10% of the whole population of that town died from COVID.
Portocerrelo had it high end, got it real bad. So did Cajamarca, where my wife's from and I lived for many years. My wife's family members, people that I knew in Campo and in Portocerrelo, in Jaén, lots and lots of people.
Brian,
bad deal.
May I tell a lighthearted COVID story?
Is there such a thing? Yes,
I don't know if it's exactly lighthearted, but this made me chuckle, and it gives a little insight into cultural differences. So my father-in-law Joaquin was just in town for a month from Peru,
from the small town of Celandine, Peru, which I'm sure had its own pandemic.
Terrible. So in Celandine, there's dual law enforcement. One is the police, and then another one is, they got some name, but it's like the community.
The Ronda Campesina.
The Ronda Campesina, exactly. Yep. So
which
that's
how would you
translate that?
I would translate that as a citizen's. It's not a militia.
Yeah, no, vigilante. It's sort of a vigilante group.
I mean, they're not looking for specific people. It's a citizen's security patrol.
All right. So the citizen security patrol.
If the citizens were armed with really nasty whips and sticks and walked around beating up on people who were offending their perception of law and order.
That's right. So what these guys are doing in Celandine, and
And by the way, that's not an exaggeration, folks. That's literally what they do.
Oh no, yeah. So in Celandine, these guys are walking around with sticks, whacking people in the butt.
Oh yeah.
So that's
I've seen it happen 100 times. I have escaped. I have been actually threatened with. No, they have something much worse than a stick. They have these flexible kind of like cattle whips. They don't. It's not the long leather whip that you snap. It's about a 4-foot long, semi-rigid, semi-flexible thin pole with a piece of like bone on the end, leather bound with a leather handle, and they kind of snap it, and it's flexible enough to hit. And it'll move a 2,000-pound bull right along. Imagine how it feels to a person.
So my understanding is what they got in Celandine are more like wooden paddles.
Yeah, that's a common thing too.
Yeah, and so one of the guys who belongs to my father-in-law's church. My father-in-law is a pastor. And he's a real religious guy, and all the people he hangs out with are also very religious folks, very respectful of laws generally, although in this case I'm about to explain the guy didn't obey the law. So there's a curfew put down, and everybody's supposed to be going out with their masks, and if you didn't have some certain certification in that little town, you were not supposed to be outside at all. But this guy broke the rules and went out. A cop caught him and wrote him a ticket and was going to let him go back to his house. But one of the guys from the Ronda Campesina wasn't having that. And as the guy started walking away, he ran up on him, just started whapping him with the paddle, and gave it to him just to prove a point, like, follow the law, don't come out here. And this very dignified sort of church patriarch just was walking around with a bruised backside for many, many days, that he couldn't sit down. And I don't know, that just strikes me funny that a very dignified man gets spanked in public like that. Yeah,
the Ronda Campesina is no joke. And these are your neighbors. I mean, those are just people from the town. Yeah, I came to a roadblock that was associated with a social protest one time, and I really needed to get past that roadblock. And I was on my motorcycle, and I waved my way up to the front through all the cars that were there. There was 100 cars waiting, and I kind of thought about running it. And as I got up to the front, a gentleman came over with one of these whip things, and as I came up fast, he came over and raised it and made it very clear he was about to really hurt me. And I stopped, parked my motorcycle, and had a very polite and civil conversation with this gentleman about my need to get past and what was the time frame and all this stuff. But I'll tell you what, those Ronda Campesina, that's no joke.
Did they end up letting you through?
The roadblock ended up being lifted about an hour later, and I went about my business.
Okay, so you weren't able to get through right at that exact time.
No, they did not let me through.
Yeah. All right. So based on this, right? Based on the Venezuelan refugee crisis and how hard Peru has been hit, like how are things looking in Peru, man?
So, Peru was a desperately poor country before any of this happened, and then the economy started taking a hit, and the social structure started taking a hit from the Venezuelans, and then the pandemic hit. Peru is now poorer, dirtier, much more desperate, and I really got a strong sense of like PTSD, of like post-traumatic stress from everybody. They're still a little bit shell-shocked from the last couple of years.
I think that's happening.
Peru is struggling. God bless everybody. They're struggling.
That's happening in the US too, but we weren't already a super poor third world country.
That's right.
Going through a similar humanitarian crisis.
Much more resources, and our medical systems held up in some cases just by their skin, but the medical system in Peru collapsed almost immediately. And people, but for instance, my wife's uncle, Luis Queso was his nickname. He literally died on the lawn outside the hospital in Cajamarca, where they'd set up tarps and told people there are no beds available. There's no care available for any illness. Wait out here. And then if somebody died inside, they would come outside and pick the youngest person who was waiting and take them in, who had the best chance of survival. And he died on the lawn along with hundreds of other people waiting for care. And that has a searing impact on people's mentality down there. And there are some people that are shell-shocked and in post-traumatic stress. It's not even it's traumatic stress, because it's still happening.
It's still happening. Neri had 2 uncles die from COVID.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's good. So we both have had, direct relatives, very, very close relatives.
Yeah.
Pass, man.
Yeah. And so, and then the economic crisis, people aren't working. The farmer, for a while, they closed all the roads at the beginning of the pandemic, and farmers just couldn't move their products. And a lot of farmers had to, eat some of their farm animals to have food. But people in the cities just had nothing.
I mean,
they don't have animals to eat.
In a situation like that, farmers at least have food.
They have food. They could at least harvest for their own consumption, and within their villages, they could barter products. But it's been tremendously impactful on Peru, and in no way has it been positively impactful.
Yeah. So you went through the capital city. Like, what was the vibe there compared to how it's been in the past?
So I would say it is, like I say, you can see that public services have suffered. It's dirtier. Everybody talks about how crime is worse, and it felt a little bit more edgy and dangerous. I had to go to meet with somebody to a pretty bad part of town, and it was bad. It didn't feel safe. And I've rarely not felt safe in Peru, but there were a lot of young Venezuelan guys hanging around who've moved into that neighborhood, who are known for their gang activity, who were eyeing me like a piece of meat.
You know what, man?
Didn't feel safe at all.
And it sucks because a lot of those Venezuelans in Venezuela very well could have been law-abiding citizens.
Oh, absolutely.
But poverty has turned them into criminals, which
That's right.
is how that goes, because they're just fighting to survive.
That's right. And everything took longer than it should have. To get my bank cards would normally be an hour. It was 2 hours in the line before a young lady came out and said, the line is over. You have to go online. There was this new online appointment system. I got an appointment. I went in. They couldn't get it done. Their systems are down. The power's going off all the time. The state has run out of resources to do maintenance on their infrastructure and systems. So I had to stay an extra night in Hainan and go back the next day. The passport, it's ironic. Peru, even though it's super poor, has always been, you could always get your passport in an hour, as opposed to 10 weeks that it takes here in the United States, the richest country in the world. In this case, it took until the next day. And the highway, we've talked about the highway to the coast before. My plan was to go from Campo all the way down to Chiclayo on the coast. I tried to get a passport appointment in Lima. There were no appointments available until March. This was April or August when I was looking. There were no appointments available for 7 months. And I ended up getting an appointment in Chiclayo, and my plan to go down on the morning of the appointment, which was at 2 p.m, everybody said, don't do it. The highway is a disaster, and they're doing road work, and you'll be 6 or 7 hours delayed, in addition to the 6 or 7 hours it takes to drive. So I went down at night on the overnight bus. I ended up having less than 24 hours in Campo to meet with Noé and Don Fortunato and farmers. Barely had any time at all. The good news is I got everything done that I needed to get done. I didn't get robbed or murdered or anything like that. And, the people of Peru remain just as wonderful as they always have been. The food is amazing. It's going to come back. Peru's going to rebound. It's not going anywhere, but they're in a tough spot right now.
So I want to, just do a couple of comments. More and more people, Brian, are writing me and saying that they would love to do a chocolate tour or a cacao tour to Peru. And I think that's something we should consider once things start to work themselves out. That would be a really good way for us to help get some tourism money and like make some connections between the people in Campo and folks here in the United States. That might be something we should really consider in 2022 or 2023, whenever.
Yeah, it's probably a 23 thing, but I'm all for that.
Yeah, that's something we probably should get into. And let me ask you, even though I know you only had 24 hours, just how are folks doing out in Campo?
So so the experience in Campo was, I think, maybe a little less searingly bad than in cities. It didn't penetrate.
Are Venezuelans showing up out there?
No.
High-end,
yes. By the way, one other thing, for the first time ever, I saw homeless people in Peru, which I've never, ever seen before. And they were all Venezuelan. If people are wondering how I can tell, once you're very attuned to that area, there are some physical differences that make it fairly obvious to distinguish the Venezuelan refugees from the. That
makes sense. Yeah. Well, one of the things that we know about Peru that's different from the United States is families tend to stick together. So if you've got a poor person, they go just stick it out with their family. But if people come from other countries and they don't have well-established families and households where they can go hang out, then it makes sense that all that's left for them is to just live on the street.
In 15 years of living in Peru, I don't recall ever.
I don't ever.
I saw some people occasionally that were clearly drug addicts or alcoholics that were passed out on the ground outside, but I've never seen people that were clearly living in a public space until this trip.
Yeah.
So, very, very depressing to see all that. I was very happy to see all the people that I care deeply about and reestablish that contact, and just to be back in Peru after 2 years of not traveling because of the pandemic. I felt like maybe I had lost a little bit of my Peru mastery, but it's like a glove. It just fits right on me and I fit right in there. And I was right back in phase as soon as I stepped foot.
Were you able to take the gifts that people had given us?
So yeah, I took the gifts. Of course, I didn't have a chance to get much beyond Puerto Ciruelo. So the best that I could do was deliver those gifts to Noe, the president of my good dear friend and president of the Cacao Growers Association, and ask him to please distribute those to farmers. He assured me that he would.
Will he take some pictures for us, you think?
Well, Noe is not a well-known photographer. I asked his son Freddie, to please take some pictures. We'll see how that goes. They're unreliable correspondents, wonderful people, but unreliable correspondents. But I can assure you, honorable people that they are, that those gifts were met with absolute joy and satisfaction and will be distributed among the farm families. And so for the folks who sent things over for them to be distributed to the farmers, they got delivered. They're being distributed to the farmers, and the farmers, Noe and the couple of other people, Don Fortunato's son Jose and Edil's son Beru, and some other farmers that I did have a chance to meet with just down in Port Ciruelo, were absolutely as we're astounded and grateful and just as filled with gratitude as they could have been, and expressed it to me and asked me to express it to the donors. So to anybody that's listening, thank you so much on behalf of them. It's so meaningful for them.
Yeah, and I know 2021 was one of our bigger harvest seasons. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much to all of our wonderful customers. Probably 2022 will be another bigger one for us. So even though there's widespread problems in Peru, and obviously we're just a small company, we can't help so many people, but at least in that little part of the country, like, the people who buy our chocolate can do a lot of good for those people.
That's right. It's not about saving the world. It's just about shining your light and doing what you can. And so please know that this isn't our pitch to sell chocolate, because our pitch to sell chocolate is it tastes amazing and it's a good price. It's a great
value. Yeah,
it's a great value. But also know that in between or in addition to great taste and great value, you're doing your little part to shine your light in the world. Purchasing our chocolate helps us buy cacao at a very high price with a great model, a pro farmer model that makes material and concrete difference in the lives of farmers in that valley. And they really appreciate it. So, thank you to everybody, not only who sent stuff down, but who buys our chocolate, for any reason. We appreciate it.
All right. So now I want to tell you, bro, the other request that I've gotten recently is for us to talk more about how chocolate itself is made. Mm-hmm. The feedback that I received from one of our great customers, Greg, and who's also a business owner, and said that he also likes to hear what we're talking about, because it gives him some hope and encouragement for running his own small business as well. Mm-hmm. So we're having that effect on people too, which is pretty cool. And his comment was, we talk a lot about how to process cacao and what's going on in Campo, but what's going on in Switzerland and how the chocolate actually gets made feels like sort of a black box to him. And so I thought we could take the second half of this show.
Let's start opening that up.
Yeah,
and let's make it a multi-show thing. I mean, we don't have to just, we don't want to rush through it, because the chocolate is fundamental. So yeah.
So let's just assume then that everybody remembers how cacao gets fermented and dried. Mm-hmm. And we did 2 episodes on the entire logistics process. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what happens when you take a dried cocoa bean and it arrives in Switzerland at the factory, and how does a dried cocoa bean get transformed into what we sell on our website and in our store? How does it get transformed into Fortunato No. 4 chocolate?
All right, well, let's start at the beginning. What is currently Europe was many, many millions of years ago was part of one continent called Pangaea. And so let's talk about plate tectonics, because if we don't address the plate tectonic issue, then there's no way to even account for why Europe is where it is. You know what I mean?
Then we're going to have to get into the Roman Empire, obviously.
Seems clear to me.
The Reformation. I know
All
Switzerland.
the different, yes,
Switzerland
absolutely.
was a Calvinist country for a very long time.
So we'll have to talk about Calvin. And so let's just, let's
Yeah.
start at the very, so 13 billion years ago. No, no, I digress. So let's just fast forward to all of that.
Yeah, I would call that a digression.
Yeah, let's fast forward to all of that. And let's fast forward to about 1890, when chocolate was just the production of chocolate was just being modernized. And in a castle in Spain, some chocolate maker had these machines called conches. And a conch, and I'll get a little bit more into what a conch is, but these machines were operative in the 19th century. And the company that we make our chocolate with, Felklin AG in Switzerland, Max Felklin AG, has these 19th century machines operating in their factory. It's so cool. And I said that at the beginning to paint a picture of how incredibly cool this company, this factory, the place they are, and chocolate making in general is.
Can I just make one?
So sweet. It's so cool.
I just want to make one comment here.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out. You said it before. Our sales pitch here is the chocolate is delicious and it's a great value. And we looked at a lot of chocolate companies that we could have worked with. We considered making our chocolate ourselves. But I remember this. I think what it really came down to is when we first got started, there were already people who were 100 years ahead of us in making chocolate and were stone cold experts. Where the missing piece was actually in campo, buying and processing cacao and having relationships with the farmers. So we made a strategic decision to focus all of our attention on that part of the process and to partner up with a company who was vastly superior to us in making chocolate and who's better than we could ever reasonably expect to be. And that is why we outsource this entire process to Max Felklin, although we retain ownership of the product at all times. That's why we don't make chocolate, and this is why we chose Max Felklin AG, because we felt that would give us the best chance for making something exquisite,
transcendent,
the best it could possibly be. So go ahead, man.
Well, that's all correct, except for your use of the word strategic. As I recall from the Bush administration, it's strategeristic.
No, strategery. Yeah, strategery.
Strategery. So strategeristic is the extension of that.
That's from Saturday Night Live, dude. Bush didn't actually say that.
Didn't he say that?
No, it was a Saturday Night Live.
Well, this isn't the first time that I've confused Saturday Night Live with reality.
This is Will Ferrell playing George Bush, and he's doing a debate. And they say, if you could sum up your entire first term in one word, what would it be? And he gets a quizzical look on his face. He goes, strategery.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Yeah. So anyhow, please incorporate the proper vernacular into your
strategery.
Strategery. So, okay. So wait a minute. Before we talk about Felklin, let's just talk about chocolate making in general, and then I will talk about how Felklin.
Okay, but you were talking about the content.
I did. I started the wrong thing. All
right. Well, all right. Let's run it back then.
Let's talk about. Let's start over. Let's talk about how generally what are the steps in chocolate making. We've talked about cacao, which comes off the tree, gets fermented in 2 steps, anaerobic and aerobic, gets pre-dried, gets dried under the sun, gets selected to get all the stuff that's not great for making chocolate out of it, and then bagged and shipped. And then it arrives at a chocolate factory, any chocolate factory. All right. And so you've got these dry beans that have about 6% moisture content in them. They're about the size of an almond with an outer shell. Similar, I should have some on hand here to show for the folks who watch this in video feed, but I have some in my house. But those beans, they're actually the seeds of the cacao tree, go through a series of processes, as anything does, to become. So the first thing that typically happens is a at least in a large, well-equipped factory, is a decontamination step. It's possible that those beans, our beans do not. We've had them extensively tested, but some cacao beans, particularly those that are dried on the ground, on tarps on the ground, where animals, chickens, dogs may get on them, where rocks may, from passing cars, may kind of bounce over on them, dust, things like that settle on them. they go through a couple of decontamination steps. First, the beans will be run through it's a machine that has metal bars that are magnetic, that attracts ferrous or magnetic rocks out of the beans and latches onto these little magnetic bars. And then the beans pass through, and it's a way of sort of decontaminating them. And then they'll go through shaker screens, which will shake out any small things that aren't beans, little bits of stuff that may be on there. And then they'll go through a decontamination cycle, which is typically either ultraviolet to kill bacteria and viruses, or it also can be a blast of super hot steam in an enclosed chamber, steam and pressure, not enough to roast the bean, but enough to kill any biological contamination that's on the outside of the shell. And it also loosens up the shell a little bit to make it easier to winnow them, which we'll talk about in a second. So typically there's a cleaning and decontamination step at the very beginning. Now, I want to be really clear about that. Our beans don't require that. Our beans are dried in an animal-free area, fenced off the ground, under cover. There are no rocks. There are no detritus or foreign material has ever been found by any client of ours ever in any of our beans. And the kind of high-end beans that Felklin is processing typically don't have a lot of that stuff either. But as you get into lower grades of things, it's very
well. And saying and all the industrial chocolate you might buy, your Snickers bars, your Hershey's, your Mars, they have to buy so much cacao.
Yeah,
like the amount of cacao that they have to buy to have a candy bar on every shelf in every store everywhere in the world. They have to take any cacao they can get their hands on.
Staggering.
Even at the right price.
Even a mid-sized company like a client of ours, Riegelein in Germany, which specializes, they have a fine side, but they actually specialize in molded figurines, hollow molded figurines made of chocolate for Easter, for Halloween, for Christmas, and for other holidays. And they have all this incredible machinery. This is a company that no one in America has even heard of. This is a company that very few people outside of Germany have heard of. They sell 18 to 20,000 tons of chocolate a year.
Yeah. So they got to get their hands.
Huge amount of chocolate.
They have to get their hands on a lot of cacao, which means that
they have machines as big as a school bus.
And frankly, at that level of production, the cacao is just so you can call it chocolate.
Yes,
it's right. You're not buying cacao for the flavor of the cacao.
No,
you're buying it so that you can call it chocolate.
The dominant flavor in those kinds of confections is milk and sugar
and vanilla.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So first off, there's typically a decontamination step, and then you go to what is probably the most critical part of chocolate making, and that is the roast. Just like with coffee, the roast is absolutely critical.
So let me point out two things here, if I may just chime in. I would say there's two things that have what we'll call like a Pareto effect or an 80-20 effect on the flavor of chocolate. The ferment.
There's three things.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to go
before the ferment, the genetics.
But a lot goes into that, the terroir and right. Also the genetics. But yes, but the ferment.
Yes.
I mean, the ferment and the roast.
Those are the two absolutely critical steps.
Those are and so half of that, actually more than if a cacao bean is terribly fermented, it doesn't matter what you roast it, how the roast is.
The only option you have at that point is to
burn it out and add other stuff.
Burn out the funk. Which was the number one hit song of my band in college. But
what was the name of your band?
What's that?
What was the name of the band?
Ironically, it was Funk Burn. The band was called Funk Burn, and our number one hit was Burn Out the Funk. So yeah, it's kind of a circular.
You named the band after you came up with the song.
No. That's the wild thing. The band was named first, and then the song came after. And we had many hits, but the number one hit was Burn Out the Funk by Funk Burn. Yeah.
Why don't you just do a little rendition of that for us?
No. Please, I'm much too humble.
Burn out the funk.
Burn out the funk.
So the ferment, which is what you mastered the process of that, and you developed the process of that, is like a heavy component of what the chocolate's going to taste like. But the second process oriented thing is the roast, which is probably the most important part of what they do.
The most important part of chocolate making itself is the roast, for sure. And so that can happen in a number of ways. So a small craft chocolate maker can have often we'll start with a small convection oven, which is just an oven with heat and an air circulation pattern that distributes the heat and accelerates the roasting process. And commercial convection ovens are typically like a big box about the size of a refrigerator with various racks, 7 or 11 or 13 racks, and you would put the beans in laid flat in one layer and put them in and leave them in there for maybe 20 minutes. And there's a certain roasting profile and take them out. Then as you get a little bit bigger, you have rotating drums.
Yep.
Drum roasters, they're
similar
called.
to coffee.
Similar to coffee, that's right. Although there are some technical differences. The drums that you use to roast cacao typically have metal veins on the inside that cause a certain stir pattern of those beans. They rotate at a little bit different speed. They have a little bit different temperature profile, but same concept, which is you're tumbling the beans and roasting them. And the idea being that everything gets roasted very evenly because they're constantly moving and they have a random their position within the drum and exposure to the heat is random at any time.
And let me point out that the way that Max Felkin AG develops a roast profile requires a tasting panel. The gentleman who is in charge of developing recipes at Falkland has been doing this for like 50 years. Sep. Coming up with that roasting profile is crucial. And like a big part of the reason why we're working with Max Felkin AG is because they take roasting profiles and flavor profiles extremely seriously.
Ultimate professionals. I mean, they could not be more meticulous and detail oriented about it. And so developing a roasting profile is its own art. And I'm barely qualified to comment on it, but it requires, so they don't use their big roasters for that. They have small test roasters and they run through. Now, when you have the kind of experience that they do, they can taste a raw bean and they can come up with a very good idea of what that bean's going to want and go through some very subtle variations until they have what they consider to be the perfect roast. They don't have to start from scratch the way someone like you or I might, and think, but so they will develop a roasting profile through trial and error. Normally they'll be doing that with 1/2 kilo lots in a small test roaster, a very small version of that drum. It goes around and around with little metal vanes, all stainless steel. And they have temperature sensors on the inside and a programmable logic chip powered control panel that will allow them to adjust the speed, the temperature, the time, and not just the temperature at any moment, but it's all about how the temperature gradient occurs.
That's so interesting.
How does the heat penetrate the bean? So if you have a temperature gradient that's too fast, if you go from, I'll speak in Celsius because that's the universal language of industrial process almost everywhere, including in many places in the U.S. If you go from 40 degrees Celsius up to 70 degrees Celsius in 12 minutes, what you're going to do is you're going to overheat the outside of the bean and not give enough time for the heat to penetrate to the inside of the bean. You're going to get an uneven roast where the outside, it's sort of like if you flash roasted a piece of toast so that it's black and crispy on the outside, and it's basically just raw toast on the inside.
And I do that. I flash roast toast.
Absolutely. Well, that's your right. It doesn't make it the correct way to do it, but it's your
no. I mean,
right.
I've got a flash roaster.
Oh well. I assumed you did. I mean,
no, that was a good example, bro.
Yeah. But so what you want in the case of cacao, in most cacao, is you want to have that heat penetrate in and roast the center of the bean roughly the same as the outside of the bean, and that requires a slower roast and a lower gradient of acceleration. You want that heat to start at 40 and gently climb up to 70 over the course of 34 or 5 minutes, and really penetrate that bean and evenly roast throughout the bean, and also slowly develop those flavor characteristics that are in there, slowly achieve what's called a Maillard reaction, where the inside of the bean begins to brown and becomes a little bit more brittle. And also, of course, you have to just get that water out of there. So as you're roasting the beans, they lose about 5 to 7% of their weight, depending on what their moisture content was going into the roaster. And they also lose the weight of the shell After roasting, they're going to take those shells off of those things in a process that we'll talk about in a set called winnowing. And so typically when you roast cacao, if you start with 100 kilos or pounds, you'll end up with anywhere from 72 to 78 kilos or pounds at the end. You lose that much of the
after
mass.
after you take the shell off as well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So that roasting is absolutely critical. The temperature gradient, the final temperature that they achieve, and how you get it there, and then how you cool it down dictates the flavor of that bean and that chocolate forevermore.
And one thing that fascinates me and that I just love this kind of thing is that we've been using the same recipe and the same roasting profile this whole time.
That's
so
right.
Like these experts tasted this cacao and they said, this is the best it can be. And I agree with them. They said, this is the best it can be. And forevermore, this is how we make your chocolate.
And I can tell you, so I have made chocolate at 3 different chocolate factories with our beans
in Peru,
always trying to replicate the Falcon. But when I have not been able to replicate the Falcon roasting profile, when I have varied either due to mechanical problems or as an experiment, I can assure you the product just isn't as good.
So you've been able to take their roasting profile and do it on other machines in Peru. And it's like, that's what this cacao bean requires, period.
And when I have the chocolate tastes great in almost direct proportion to how closely you stick the landing on that roasting profile. So I have spreadsheets that show my the Falcon profile, and then my temperatures that I hit, recording them every minute. I've stood by the roasting machine and recorded the temperature literally every 60 seconds and tracked it and compared it to their roasting profile and come up with an average variation away from the Falcon profile and the temperature gradient and so forth. And typically due to machine issues, mechanical problems, when the roasting profile doesn't match quite closely the Falcon profile, what you get is a chocolate that's great, but not amazing.
Yeah.
They hit it. They nailed it. They made the perfect profile to really, so think about the tiny little things that can affect how, when I talk about that temperature gradient, when I talk about the penetration of the heat into the center of the bean, well, a bean from Ecuador, which are known to be kind of a lower fat bean, might have 44 to 46% cocoa butter or intrinsic fat inside the bean. Our beans are closer to 52 to 54%. So all those lipids, those fats that are in the bean, absolutely affect the way that heat penetrates and dissipates and roasts and creates that Maillard effect inside the cacao bean. And so that's why you couldn't take, let's imagine that there was a farm of perfectly genetically pure Nacional beans in Ecuador, same terroir, same everything, but with a lower fat percentage.
The roast would have to be different.
The roast would have to be different. The roast would have to be different. And it would be to take into account the different chemical, their soil is going to be slightly different. It's going to have a different chemical component. It's going to have a different fat content. It's likely to have it's likely to have experienced some differences in its post-harvest processing and have a slightly different water content. All that stuff affects the roast, and they have to be able to generate that roasting profile based on those kind of subtle differentiations. It's incredibly difficult and
it takes a lot of subtlety and a real big league palate. I mean, a real big league palate. And what's curious about that is, actually, you remember did you ever see the movie The Devil Wears Prada?
Yes, I have seen that movie.
You remember that scene where she's talking about this color that the girl is wearing and how that started at the very top?
She said it's a color blue, and the gal Meryl Streep, who was playing somebody, starts talking about all the thousands of details that went into that color and the repercussions of that color becoming popular throughout the value chain all the way out. Yeah,
correct. So you don't need to have a world-class palate to enjoy Fortune No. 4 chocolate or some kind of great food. You'll eat it and you just go like, wow, that's amazing. It just hits.
And you may not even know what about it made you think it's so amazing.
And you really don't need to know why. You just need to know that you love it and you enjoy it. But and this goes back to you also, your fermentation of the cacao. But for something that good to exist, it's a long tail that goes all the way back to deep experience.
Yes.
And deep knowledge for the subtleties of the product. So it's important to me, in order to not take things for granted, it's super important to remember the work that went into them.
Yes.
And anything that is a great product or is something of very high quality, if you walk it back, there's some human beings with deep knowledge and deep experience at the beginning of that process.
Absolutely. Now, so let's
just like going deep on the subtleties of what it requires to make something great.
So let's take an example that will resonate probably with the folks listening here. At whatever town you're in, there's probably a really good, let's just call it a really good pizza place. Okay. So what makes a really good pizza? So what's a place that's got a really high rep for pizza, Adam?
In town? What about
no, not a restaurant, but a place in the world that's got a really high rep for pizza.
You're more of a pizza guy than I am, man. You tell me the place in New York. Somewhere.
Yeah. New York pizza. New York pizza is typically. Why is that?
Okay, you were saying from where, not like
where? No, what location, right? But what? So
because there's a bunch of Italians there that brought the stuff from the old country.
That's part of it. But the type of pizza they do in New York is not the type of pizza that they do in Italy. This is a creation of the United States. The type of Italian food we eat here is largely an Americanized version of Italian food. But yes, there were 100,000 really, really knowledgeable Italian folks that wanted to cook. And they had to go out and identify the flour that would make the amazing masa. They had to learn how to recreate the amazing cheeses using American. But what is it? So what is it that makes New York pizza from New York so much better than a slice of New York style pizza in Seattle? Well, many people think it's the chemical composition of the water supply in New York City, which comes from upstate New York, filters out of a particular aquifer, goes through a level of clay, and becomes chemicalized in such a way that cannot be duplicated.
Well, anywhere. and that a lot of people say that about all types of breads all over the country. Like there's but somebody has to understand that.
That's what I'm saying.
In order to make it happen.
In order to understand that, and our beans are fermented using a particular type of wild yeast that occurs only in our project and gives a particular flavor to our beans, reacts in a particular chemical way. So if you take any restaurant, take an amazing Mexican restaurant that's in your neighborhood, that person, let's say that person either is an immigrant from Mexico or had parents or some kind of Mexican heritage. And they have what you just called a tail of knowledge that reaches back to the old country, that deep knowledge of the materials. They can differentiate between what's a cheese that's going to really make it pop or a cheese that's just not as good. They can go to the market and pick the peppers that are going to absolutely, just by feeling them, by knowing them, that are going to give it that extra flavor. They can make their sauces. They can change one little ingredient. They have all that incredible knowledge that's built up over a lifetime, and not just their lifetime, but the life of their parents and grandparents, that have all filtered down to this plate that makes it so spectacular. It's the same with chocolate. Those 700 years of experience on the staff at Felkland combined to let them be able to create a roasting profile that serves the needs of that bean in an extremely specific way.
And if you think about, you just using the Mexican food restaurant or even the pizza, you bite into it and you go, oh, this is qualitatively different than anything I've ever had.
And you don't know why, because you don't have that tail of knowledge.
You just know.
You just know it's amazing.
And you don't need to know, but and even if you're not a culinary expert or you're not a food critic or
we're
whatever.
We're not foodies. We're really not.
We're not. But you just go like, wow, that is the best thing that's the best Mexican food I've ever had.
Right. And so there's a lot of things that I don't know. Yesterday, you and I had lunch with your dad. And I had a bowl of soup that I consider absolutely superior.
I agree with that.
That bowl of soup was phenomenal. I mean, I ate literally every last drop and everything in that bowl, something I rarely do. It's at one of my very favorite soup places right here where we live. And I couldn't tell you what made that soup so great. I don't know the ingredients. I don't know their process. I can tell you that was a soup that was made with extreme care and knowledge and was slowly produced. You don't get those kind of flavors from a fast process. It's slow. They were boiling stuff, for 18 hours to get that flavor. I don't know what it was, but it came together in such a way that it made me go, oh, this is amazing.
And we're about
That's what we're talking about.
And we're gonna have to wrap it up. But let me make one last comment about that. When you consider all of that, you talked about the 700 years of experience at Falkland. You talked about generations of knowledge leading up to a specific plate that's put in front of you.
Right.
You're talking about boiling soup for 18 hours, but we're talking about recipes that have been developed over generations.
Yep.
When you consider all of that, good food, really good stuff, is a tremendous bargain.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous value. When you
Mhm.
think about everything that was required for that bowl of soup to come up, to be able to be made and make you go like, oh, okay, you paid $15 for it. Like
Right.
that's a good deal. Or you pay $20
Yeah.
for a bar of our chocolate, or you pay, I don't know, what's a really good slice of pizza cost in New York?
A great slice of pizza is still $2-3 in New York. That's the amazing thing about
I
it.
mean, it's an insane bargain when you think of all of the years and knowledge that are required to make it happen.
Yeah.
And along the same lines, I would say really, really crappy food that has no thought put into it is overpriced.
It really is.
Because comparatively something good doesn't cost that much more, but it's so much better.
Yeah. And this is the amazing thing. This is something I've come to know a little bit as I've gotten a little older and as we've been in the food industry, which is you and I aren't foodies. We don't have fancy taste. The soup I'm talking about was a bowl of ramen.
It's a bowl of ramen.
It was a bowl of ramen. The chocolate I'm talking about, it's a bar of chocolate. I'm talking about a plate of enchiladas, but it's not that the food is fancy. It's that it's excellent.
It's that it's excellent.
It's that it's excellent. And so that's what you're not looking for fancy. You're looking for that excellence. And so we'll continue in the next episode with the chocolate making process. But the reason we got bogged down in roasting is because it's that important. And because
it is.
Max Felkman AG are that amazing. These guys are wizards when it comes to developing a roasting profile, and they hit it right out of the park. So that's why we spent so much time talking about the roasting. It's that important, that critical, that central to everything that the chocolate can be.
Yep. All right, bro. Let's wrap it up. And we'll pick this up on the next podcast. I think we probably have at least like 8 or 9 more steps to go through.
That's right. I thought you were going to say 8 or 9 more episodes to go.
No, maybe we need 2 more episodes, but we'll see how it goes.
Wait till we do our 2-hour special on winnowing. It's just going to be amazing. All the 9,000 years of experience that goes into separating the shell from the bean. These people are going to be blown away.
Bro, I'm going to need you to go ahead and sign me off with two musical numbers today. Go ahead.
But before that, I just want to reiterate my gratitude and all the love I'm sending out to the folks that sent things over here for me to take down to the people in Peru. They really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. We love you. And thank you so much. And I also just want to thank everybody who goes to the website, buys the chocolate. We should talk just a little bit logistics. Christmas is coming. Last year, the post office had some notable problems with deliveries. So, folks, if you want to get it's early November. If your chocolate keeps, if you're thinking about getting chocolate for yourself as a present for Christmas, don't wait. Just go ahead and order. It's going to keep fine. It's going to be in great condition. The time to order is now. We have stock. It's going to get there in time. You're better off just go ahead and doing it now. And also, I'd like to say, look for a couple of product specials that are going to be happening pretty quick, where you're going to be able to get some extra value for your order, maybe a couple of extra things thrown in. More to be said about that later once we have them fully set up. But this is a thank you, and this is a call to go ahead and get your orders in now, just to make sure that Christmas doesn't end up being disappointing, as it was unfortunately for some folks last year due to delivery problems.
Yep, and just remember that you can get your order at fortunatochocolate.com. And all right, bro. So why don't you go ahead and sign us off first with another rendition of "Burn Off the Funk."
Burn off the funk.
Burn off the funk.
Ow! Ow! This is my burn off the funk dance right here, Adam. You liking my vibe?
I see why the band didn't last, dude.
The band didn't make it. I don't have the dancing skills.
The songs were pretty good, but the
dancing killed it.
Yeah, the live show was not spectacular.
I did the whole Jim Morrison thing. I would just get on stage and do this. And just burn off the funk, because I was too nervous, Adam. I was too shy.
Nice.
Yeah.
But once the acid kicked in,
that's when it all started to lighten up, man.
that's when people started to get real creeped out.
Absolutely. Was that for me or for the audience? Who was doing this?
I don't know, but no, that's you.
Little of both.
Just like Jim Morrison,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
little of both.
And that's why Funk Burn, a couple of the reasons why Funk Burn didn't make
Funk Burn, yeah, that's right. And there were obviously, the fact that we chose that for our name should talk about our business acumen. It was not well developed at the time.
All right, bro. And then why don't you go ahead and sign us off with the Fortunato jingle as well.
Fortunato, yum!
All right, everybody. We'll check you later.
Have a good one. Thanks, everybody.